a few of you. I will say, Tommy and Snaz, that's the most understated intro I've ever heard. I don't know. I didn't get the script. I was expecting big, bombastic, brawler style intros from you two.
When it comes to intros, if there's no loose lips Leroy, we just don't know what to do.
Fair enough. So I know a few of you, and I know there's a lot of crossover between Brawlers and Music Mogul. And we obviously appreciate your support, and we're really excited to talk to you about Music Mogul today. But talk about a team effort. For those of you who don't realize, David is the one who designed the original Brawlers economy. So for those of you who enjoyed that and that worked well, David gets all the credit. He did an incredible job taking on a task that's really, really complicated. And, again, David has stepped up to the plate and done a lot of the really interesting and compelling, design work here on Music Mogul. And so his talents and efforts are being spread across kind of the entire Wax Studio portfolio. So I am Mike Rubinelli. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Chief Gaming Officer. And I also have a long history in building, core game content across many, many years for many, many companies on hopefully a lot of titles that you guys have played and enjoyed. And really excited to talk to you today about Music Mogul and, talk about all the great things that we've learned from kind of our past history in core gaming as well as in Web3 gaming and how it's manifested itself inside of Music Mogul, which we think is a big win for the community.
I couldn't agree more. I'm really excited to have the opportunity for you guys to really showcase what you've been doing and what you've been working on, because it really feels like we're working with magic in the space right now. And I think it's exciting to showcase and highlight what work actually is being put into developing something as great as multiple IP titles in the ecosystem itself. So with that being said, what really inspired the creation of Music Mogul?
Part of it is my background in music, so I worked in the music industry. I kind of, find that aspect of the business really, really fascinating. The other thing is that, I'm a big fan and player of fantasy football, for those of you who are familiar with it. And I just thought it was a really interesting idea to maybe try and marry those two and create, kind of a fantasy football is the idea of you are the manager of a football team. And I think that actually it works regardless of which football you're talking about, American or rest of world football. But it's kind of that same process of you have to have a roster or a lineup, and you have to try and pick the best artists or athletes to create the best team that is going to help you win in a competition against other players who are doing the same thing. So I think that's kind of where the original inspiration came from.
I've never heard somebody describe it as fantasy football for musical artists, and I really like that. So what was the biggest obstacle you really feel like you've been facing when theorizing how to bring the idea of being this talent manager type person into a blockchain compatible game?
The biggest challenge, I think, is trying to create gameplay loops that close enough, mimic the real world way in which these things work, but not make it so complicated that it just becomes laborious. And that's been, I think, the biggest challenge in terms of designing the gameplay. We've actually gone through several iterations of this game design and the gameplay loops. I think we've got it now to a really good place. And just for sort of people's understanding, we've been working on this game now for just slightly over a year now. So, that's how much time we've been putting into thinking and, about the gameplay. And if you saw what the game design was when it was first developed to what it is now, you'll see a lot of sort of improvements, enhancement, refinement to the gameplay to get to what you're finally going to get to play, hopefully in a couple months here.
Yeah, and to add to that on the design and the creative side, I think the challenge for us has always been, on the one hand, the min-maxers want to go and buy the best of everything, and they want to put forth a really great lineup for the player versus player kind of global competitions, which will, by the way, will be available on day one, which is a really important lesson we learned from Brawlers. But, just because you have the best lineup doesn't guarantee that you're going to, win and have the most streams that week. You'll be much better off than people who don't necessarily. But just like, the New York Yankees who try to buy the best lineup every year in baseball, they don't always win the World Series. When you have very favorable matchups in fantasy football, you think, oh, I'm going against the worst pass defense in the league. Therefore, my receivers are going to have, an incredible day. And sometimes they don't. Like, it's not always a foregone conclusion. And so kind of getting that balance and that tension right of kind of success ratios is really, not easy to do. And again, that's the balance that we're trying to strike, that, again, we want it to make sense to people. Go, oh yeah, I get it. But yet you're not always going to just win by default just because you have the best of everything. There's a lot of kind of magic to the nuances of the design that David has pulled together.
I love that you brought that up, because I think it's really important for people to know that there has been so much thought put forth in the understanding of balancing an ecosystem. And that I know I read in the articles before that some of the quests that people are going to have to do actually will require different tiered stars from the genres itself, correct?
Yeah. So, just like we wanted to sort of have something that required people to really constantly be thinking about their lineup and having to adjust their lineup week to week, because that's the way fantasy sports works, right? A lot of, I think, play to earn games or blockchain games up to this point, it really was like, as Michael said, it was a min-max thing. It was you just figured it out. You figured out the best meta, and then you just set it and you basically forget it, which makes it so it's not particularly fun because you're not really that engaged from week to week. With Music Mogul, we want to really create a week-to-week loop that required you to pay attention and to actually do real thinking every week in order to have the maximum or best outcome, or a chance at the best outcome.
Yeah, and to put a finer point on that as well, we've learned a lot of lessons from blockchain brawlers, as I said earlier. But one of the ones that we think is most important is human decisions are better than automated decisions. And when you lean in as an individual and you put a lot of thought into something, you're going to have a better experience and a better outcome than the people who don't. And that's not to say that this is an exhaustive, overly scrutinized kind of process. But again, it won't be something that can be easily automated.
I'm very, very excited for whenever this game actually officially launches. Before we get into details about that, I would love to bring up another trivia question. And this will go the same exact way, where you'll put your answers in the comment section underneath the most recent Twitter space shared tweet by the Wax official account. So, because we're talking about how people got started in the space, which music mogul pop artist had his big break after busking in the city of Seattle? So hopefully you guys heard that. If you want to, you can always go back and listen to the replays to submit your answers. Again, this is going to be a little bit different. It's not in the Discord itself. It is in the comment section. And the spelling does matter. So go ahead and get your answers in while you can. I'll repeat it one more time. Which music mogul pop artist had his first big break after busking in the city of Seattle, Washington? And with that being said, I want to bring it back into talking about the gameplay. I know that you guys had your first pack sale and it went amazing. It sold out. Congratulations. And it's also my understanding that the gameplay will be available after the genre packs are all released. So can you really elaborate on the type of genres that are going to be featured for whenever this game goes live?
Yeah, so the genres are going to be the genres that you normally would expect to see in a music game. So you've got your pop. With the next sale we've got coming up tomorrow is for hip hop and R&B, and then coming down the line will be genres such as rock and country and EDM. Because that's the I think genres that most people are familiar with. And if you ever actually look at real world music charts, that's how they break up artists into various different charts, which is going to be key because we want people to have a lot of different PvP competition options. It's not just one leaderboard. So, somebody can just dominate all the time because they bought all the best stuff. It's going to be a lot of different leaderboards that you can compete on, which will give everybody, regardless of what, amount of NFTs they own, a chance to compete against other people who are in a similar position with them.
So I really like the aspect of having a leaderboard and a competition styled game that's not necessarily a competition in general. It's more along the lines of how you theorized the best lineup to go out. So what kind of aspect to the gameplay do the genres really take the biggest priority in?
They actually take priority in both the touring and the chart competitions. So with regards to touring, your what touring options are available to you at any given time will all have a artist genre and star level requirement to them. And which options you get each period are really going to be randomly selected. It's kind of a randomized system that we have. So you have to have a good variety of artists in both genres and audio and star level to be able to utilize as many touring opportunities as are presented to you. And then when you get to the chart combats, or sorry, the chart PvP side, the leaderboards, because every week you will be able to compete on leaderboards that are both general and genre specific. The more artists you have in more genres, the more options you'll have in terms of which competitions you can, really be good in. If you only have one artist in like a genre like hip hop, you're probably not going to be very competitive on the hip hop leaderboard. Whereas you may have many artists in the pop genre, which will make you very competitive on the pop leaderboard. So and again, the more leaderboards you can compete on, the more chances you'll have to earn more.
I'm very excited about this because it really does add the mogul feeling to the game itself. And with that, really, your team took a lot of time to create biographies and accessories and character designs for all of the different artists in each genre. And a lot of the collectors have actually even formed attachments to their favorite musical artist and their favorite characters and their favorite background. So will you walk us through really the creation process of what it was like to develop these characters and these artists?
Well, David's going to walk you through that, but one quick programming note on that is they were developed by Cub Studios, which is the group that developed the Blockchain Brawlers NFTs. So if you think these look cool and interesting or are highly stylized and aesthetically very pleasing, it's because we love the work that they did on Brawlers and all the different set pieces that came from that group. And we went back to them and we said, what can you do, in this game? And they came back with some concepts that just blew us away. And we said, yes, more of that, please.
Yeah. So as Mike said, it's Cub Studio. So they create the artwork. And then we have a team of writers who help create the biographies based on the artwork.
Very exciting. Now, whenever you go over into the naming process, is that after you see kind of the background biographies and the art put together and then choose the names, or is that before you do the biographies itself?
No, the names come before biographies.
I think that's really fun, and I know that they all have such like really unique personalities and backgrounds and histories and how they got started, and all of them actually have their location on the NFT itself, which I think is a really neat attribute feature. Is there going to be anything in the game that has to deal with location artists?
Not location in terms of where the artist is from. In the real world, that's not a super relevant factor to success most of the time. So, we didn't think, again, we want to try and recreate what it takes to be successful in the real world. So, that's just sort of more for color. I think what you're going to see is that, as you said, as people, start getting attachment to certain artists, and I think they will. I think when you see artists perform well for you on the charts, you're going to start, getting favorites, just like you probably do in a lot of games where, you're not able to just completely min-max with one lineup. And what's going to be interesting, I think, and we've seen this with Blockchain Brawlers, right, is the story that the community creates and builds around these characters beyond what we give them in the bios. And I think over time, as as the artists or as the people play the game, and you see the specific performance of the artists on the charts over time, I think narratives will start building out of that.
That's awesome. I'm excited for that.
I am too. I love what the Brawler community really did with the character lore and really building into the Brawler verse. And I think being able to see how this pans out with the community involvement and really just the animated players is going to be really awesome when it comes to lore. Is there any official lore that you think might unfold as the game progresses? And that would typically be from the studio side. So I'm sure that they probably anticipate being able to play off of the gamers' ideas, right?
Yeah, no, we don't have any formal lore that's going to go out on day one necessarily. And, as David said, a lot of those things will come organically. And so we'll wait to see what kind of thematic elements emerge. And, there's some great sort of content creators that live in Brawlers, and they speak to each other through memes. And we even had a World War meme competition between three folks, and that kind of started a series of side wars and images. And it just was this really organic, wonderful thing to see the community come together and play off each other. And we expect that that'll be exactly the same with Music Mogul, and can't wait to see what the community creates.
Me either. I am so excited. I know that you guys did such a fantastic job with the creation of giving them personalities in life. And really, my favorite character so far has been Scottish, and she's awesome. She wears biker boots and has an affinity for skulls and has the voice of a choir girl, which I really think is fun because I loved Avril Lavigne growing up. And I could not help but to think of her whenever I was reading this character's description and knowing her as a pop artist. So this is going to be another trivia question to really reward somebody who's the first person to know exactly what artist I'm talking about. So the trivia question will be worded more like, who is the pop artist that has the affinity for skulls and wears the biker boots from Scotland? So go ahead and put your answers below. Moving into our next part of the Q&A, how do you feel that Music Mogul differentiates itself from other games that exists in the blockchain market?
I think the main difference, and people will see this when they are able to start playing the game, is the way the loop works, and it is a true loop. So, what you do in one activity will impact your ability to perform in the other activity. So between touring and charts, and then your ability to earn is really going to be skill based to some extent. It's going to be based on the skill of your decision making, because you will be able to earn some amount just from successfully managing the touring and recording room activity. But where you're really going to earn and have a chance to really earn a larger amount is based on how you do competing against other players. That's where you're going to really make the big earnings.
I absolutely see a lot of theory crafting videos coming out for this. That's what I anticipate from the community, because I think that with something like having a reward system based off of how well you thought out your lineup, I think this is going to be a really awesome community dynamic to really engage with.
Yeah.
So what efforts has Music Mogul really taken to set the standard for the crafting aspect and the crafting utility for NFT games? Because I really feel like the way that you've released the pack sales and introduced the crafting aspect to the game before the game launches was a unique idea, and I would love to know how you thought of it and what your expectations are for future games to follow suit.
With crafting, what we really wanted to do again was have a decision-making process in the crafting. It wasn't just craft all the way till you get max. I mean, you can do that, but then you're not going to have, the lower level characters you need. So, we wanted to, again, it's all about trying to really put in as much decision-making into the gameplay as possible, because whenever you talk about a management sim game, the core play of the game is decision-making. Right. And how good are you at decision making, day to day, week to week, hour to hour, to be able to maximize your performance. So, that's kind of one thing we want to do with crafting. It's usually with any crafting system, it's all just about racing to get to the best thing you possibly can by just crafting. And in our case, it's like, well, no, you can do that, but that's probably not the optimal strategy. So you have to start making decisions about, well, do I want to craft to get a higher level character, or should I hold on to what I have because I need lower level characters, or other people need lower level characters, and I can sell them to other people. So again, just really, I think that's the main thing, is we're really trying to put an emphasis on decision making in every aspect of the game.
Yeah, and one thing we learned from a crafting standpoint, Snazzy, from kind of past Web3 games and brawlers as well, is you want to have limits, right? You don't want to have 106,000 stone axes for sale on Atomic Hub. So, breakage, limits, things of that nature, which allow you to create an equilibrium in the ecosystem, is really, really important and really valuable. And that's something that we keep an eye on. And I think the other thing that's worth pointing out, and as we look at kind of the recording sessions and the things that David talked about in terms of kind of smart human decision makings, one thing we know about our audience is that they do like things actually fairly complicated. So when you get into the booth and you see all the different variables that go into crafting a track, there is no day one obvious meta on how to optimize that performance. Like, we make you work for it a little bit. We make you think about it. We make you talk about it. We make you theory craft around it, and then we make you debate it. And then we don't give you the answers to the test. And that's kind of part of the fun and part of the joy of journeying to kind of climbing the charts and figure out kind of what configuration of assets works best. It's not like, oh, I have a legendary artist, I put him in a booth, I win. There's so much more that goes into it than that. And there's a lot of thought and a lot of depth that'll be really interesting. And again, like I said, we intentionally kind of, are ambiguous about how to reach those max results.
I really love that it focuses on the community aspect of really theory crafting and really making decisions and talking about it with each other about how to do the most optimal build for the lineups. So what kind of other community events do you foresee Music Mogul really having the ability to host? I know we were talking about leaderboards earlier, but I feel like this is going to be really exciting for events.
Yeah, I think, there's going to be some features that are very actually community centric. We haven't announced them yet, but there's going to be, one of the things we want is people to actually be able to build communities within the game. And I think we're going to end up talking about or providing more details on that feature in, another week or two, possibly. But, one of the things that is absolutely, I think, going to happen here is that people are going to talk and they're going to debate. I mean, what I love about fantasy football, and as a fantasy football player, this is probably something I spend during the season way too much time on. There are literally radio stations that are 100% devoted to talking theory week to week about what your best plays are 24/7. I mean, that's a crazy amount of community discussion that's going on. And I really, really, hope that similar stuff happens here, because I think that's what's really, really fun about these types of games.
Yeah, it's Matthew Berry, Eric Carabell, a bunch of others have made real careers, being sitting and starting lineups on a week-to-week basis. And I think the nice thing for us, Snaz, is that we appreciate healthy discourse in the community about what is the best approach or the best anything. And it goes back to the beginning of time, right? It's Nod versus GDI, it's Ken versus Ryu, it's Horde versus Alliance. Like, everybody has a perspective, everybody has an opinion, and everybody's perspective or perception is their reality. And so we want to fuel that, because we actually love that people care enough to talk about kind of, how should I play this? What should I think about? And my way is better than your way. And as long as people keep it civil, we want to allow for that to happen, because we know that's a vital part to community building, is creating that ongoing and ever-changing and evolving narrative. And just when something gets settled and the meta gets established, then we'll switch it up and we'll tune it and we'll give you something else to contemplate, as all the best games do.
I love how you added that last bit at the end, because you're right. That's the best part about being able to play a good game, is that they are constantly changing the meta, and it makes for long-term engagement.
I mean, Ethereum was born because Blizzard changed the spell shield, I believe, on the on some character in World of Warcraft that Vitalik couldn't believe that happened. He realized that he didn't have control over it. Like, there's this whole notion around kind of how gamers are impacted and sometimes traumatized by developers, live operating and changing things to be more healthy for the greater good.
Absolutely. I know that you and I have talked about other games that we like playing in the past.
Right.
So I understand the the sentiment. And I really wanted to talk about what kind of expectation that you set with the brawlers and being able to really highlight and showcase a game that was really fun for streamers to be able to showcase and really have the viewability of the game itself a lot of fun. And I know there was a really big influencer push for Music Mogul's pack releases, and it was so awesome to experiment with so many different people, really being able to see the game itself and really what Wax is doing with Music Mogul. Do you think that this will be a fun game for gamers and streamers to start sharing their experiences of as well?
I think there will be, definitely a lot of sort of user created content around it in streaming. Now, it's not going to be like your traditional game where it's action packed and therefore, you're kind of watching an action movie, right? It's going to be, again, more like streamers talking about strategy, about what happened, about what they think will happen the following week. It is this idea of people who engage in these kinds of games, like these fantasy management games. They spend a lot of time thinking about it and talking about it, with other players. And I think, just as I mentioned before, there's this whole robust business around people who create content for players to help them make decisions. I think there's going to be a lot of that with Music Mogul as well. There certainly is the opportunity for it.
There really is the opportunity for it, and I'm excited to see how our Wax ambassadors really utilize some of the packs that they were able to have in this space. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think that this is a really awesome initiative for a gameplay style in the ecosystem, because you don't see very many games of this nature of a mobile game. So I'm really excited. And this brings us to our last trivia question. Speaking of streamers and content creators, which Music Mogul artist went viral on YouTube as a way to claim her way to fame into the game itself? So this is a very interesting question. It's a really awesome artist, and I hope that somebody finds it soon, because I think that it's really fun thinking about their backstories and how this is the only one that claimed her way to fame through being viral on YouTube. So with that being said, I think I'm going to hand this over to Tommy, and we are going to start the actual AMA portion of this.
I had one last question. I don't think we asked it yet. Before we start the AMA, have you shared or discussed or expressed like the long-term vision that you have for Music Mogul?
I think long term, at some point, we would love to get real artists involved. We were exploring that, having real artists and real chart data in the game. The unfortunate reality is that music copyright, anybody who's ever had to try to deal with it, is unbelievably complicated. It was so complicated that when we're talking to certain music copyright holders, they literally couldn't figure out what classification should be given to music NFTs, which means they didn't even know how to start to engage with us on a business discussion. There's going to have to be a lot of sort of, I think, music companies, music copyright owners, and music artists are going to have a long discussion among themselves with regards to how NFTs, who owns what, who gets what from NFT sales. That's going to have to be all worked out between them before we're going to be able to realize that vision. But I'm hoping at some point they do get their act together, and so we can actually realize that vision.
David, Mike, thank you so much for coming to the space today. We will start the AMA now. I'm very appreciative of you providing this insight into your experience with the blockchain gaming space, especially with Music Mogul. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our platform for questions from the audience. If you'd like to ask a question to David or Mike, please go ahead and request to speak, and we will bring you up to the podium. And while we're waiting for our first people to go ahead and raise their hands, let me ask this question. Do you have any, this is one that's I've seen a lot in the Discord community. Are there any upcoming or soon to be released updates that you'd like to share with us, share with the community now?
Sorry, updates about Music Mogul or updates about just Wax Studios in general?
Music Mogul.
Yeah, I mean, we're absolutely. We have a, if you've seen the content calendar, we are, basically every other week going to be sharing more information about gameplay. As we get closer to game launch, that information is going to start getting more and more detailed. For anybody who's not experienced, making a game, the way it works is you absolutely kind of do a lot of the numerical stuff, the economy, if you will. That's the last thing you set, not the first. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of early blockchain games, made, was they focused on the economy first, and figured out the game later. And anybody who's actually tried to make a game with a functional economy will tell you that's really the last thing you're supposed to be working on, because you have to be able to, iterate and tune. And so, right now we've been building out the technical aspects of the game. We'll be starting to turn soon to, sort of refining and finalizing, the game economy. And as that is done, we'll be able to start sharing that information. But, right now it hasn't been settled to the point where we can actually share it.
Very cool. I know a lot in the community will be excited for the upcoming information drops, especially as you get more details, we get closer to launch. I think that's one that I'll be definitely pouring over with my fine-tuned tooth comb. All right. Thank you for coming on up, Facings. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, everybody. This is Francis from Facings. Hey. So I thought it was really interesting you brought up the copyright question when it comes to music, because that was something we also grappled over with some of the collections that we released, because we wanted to put music in, but then we ran into the issue of who owns this copyright, especially with derivatives, remixes, what do we do? And so I think what's really cool about this project is, for one thing, when you're dealing with copyright, you're dealing with the federal government, and they move at, an especially glacial pace. So we can't depend on anything happening from them. So I think what's really cool is that I think with this gameplay, you guys are going to be possibly making law with your experimentation by doing edits, derivatives, and legislatures, state and federal, are going to look to the people when they don't know what to do. So that's me pontificating personally. That's not Facings. That's me, Francis. So I probably should join with my personal. But either way. Looking forward to see the experimentation that's happening, and yeah, can't wait to see what you guys do. I'm gonna hop off.
Yeah. I just so we're clear on this, and I want people to set expectations correctly. We are not, there's not music that's being created as part of the gameplay. It is a business management sim. The music is more sort of a representation. The music that'll be in there will more be for atmosphere. Again, being somebody who worked in the music industry for a really long time and probably has better understanding of music copyright than a lot of people do, because I've had to deal with it. It's gonna take it won't be the federal government, unfortunately, who will make these changes. It really has to be an agreement that the music copyright owners, so we're talking record labels, artists, and music publishers, are going to have to come together and make some decisions about how they're going to treat NFTs with regard to copyright. Because right now they haven't made those decisions yet. And that's what makes trying to license music for NFTs so difficult.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
No, that's definitely a great insight. Thanks, Dave, for sharing that with us. That's, I'm not in the music creative space so much. So that's definitely something I'm curious about, like how we can set, if we would be the ones setting precedents. But now learning about this is exciting to see how it's going to unfold and how we can all take advantage later. We're waiting for more folks to come on up. I had another question I saw on a Discord. I've seen something kicking around. I've been thinking about it. A lot of gamers today will evaluate a blockchain game based upon game mechanics, storyline, and how much they can earn. How would you rank Musical in terms of these criteria?
So I think game mechanics are going to be the thing once they're fully revealed that people are going to initially discuss the most, because it is something, the way that the game mechanics work here is something that people have never seen before. I think that's going to get a lot of discussion, because also that's going to be relevant towards people figuring out, how do I maximize my individual earnings, or what do I have to do to get a shot in maximizing my individual earnings. So that's going to be then the second thing that people talk about. And then I think the narrative aspect of it is really going to be generated by player activity. You know, as certain players prove themselves to be really, really good at this game, again, like the best music moguls, um, you know, then the narratives are going to build around them, like, you know, often are built around real world music moguls, you know, like, you know, whether you think about people like Suge Knight, or if you think about, you know, Jimmy Iovine, or any of these, you know, really famous music moguls, you know, the narrative of the competition between them a lot of times becomes really interesting. So I think, you know, I think that's sort of the sequence in which the community will really engage with these elements.
Awesome. All right. David, because I know we haven't had you, I think we've had the pleasure of having you on one of our AMAs before. And this is a question that we often ask in most spaces that we participate in. Like, in your opinion, like, how do we get more gamers? I think Web 2 gamers, World of Warcraft players, you know, Cyberpunk players to enter the blockchain gaming space?
You know, it's going to take, I think, games that have more traditional gameplay mechanics, right? And the reality is the reason you haven't seen a lot of those yet is because it takes a long time to make them. I mean, you know, pretty much any sort of successful traditional game you've seen in the last decade has taken probably a minimum of at least 2 years and potentially 5 or more to make before it even can be launched. So, you know, I know for a fact, talking with, because I do talk to a lot of game development teams, those games are coming. It's just that, you know, they take longer to make. I think that's going to help, one, having, you know, games with mechanics that are familiar to, you know, traditional Web 2 gamers. The other thing I think, and you're going to start seeing this a lot with games that have blockchain related planned elements, is a de-emphasis on the blockchain component. You know, you're going to see a lot of games where people can start playing without having to worry about any of the blockchain stuff, and they can, you know, make purchases in game in the traditional manner. And then at some point, you know, the difference will be that they'll own these items, and if they want to sell them to other players, they'll be able to mint them and then withdraw them from the game to sell to other players. And you know, it won't be the main purpose of the game or the first thing you have to deal with. It's going to be an extra feature that players can then engage with when they're ready to engage with it. And I think that's what it's really going to take to start getting the traditional gamers into the space.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Remember, if you'd like to ask a question about Use Mogul, or a question to Mike or David specifically, please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll send the mic over to you. David, do you have a favorite Music Mogul artist that's been released so far?
I'm not a person, you know, this is the really odd thing when you work in a specific industry. And I tried to explain this to people. My time in the music industry really affected the way I listen to music and relate to artists. Once you have to do it as a business, it makes you very analytical about it. And it kind of, in a certain sense, removes that ability to have an emotional connection, like in the form of favorites. It's really kind of, you know, it's sort of unfortunate. It's kind of the price you pay, I think, for getting into something that you probably loved growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, same question. Do you have a favorite artist?
I love Casio keyboard. I'm just going to say it. I grew up with a Casio keyboard. And as soon as I saw that name, I fell in love, and I thought it was very clever. I think she's really well drawn or rendered, and I love the story. She jumps right off the page for me, and I think I have an Epic version of her. I blended all the way up to Epic and got a bunch of Casios. Yeah, I really just took to her right away and can't wait to use her. And I don't mean, I mean play the game with her. Let's not get that twisted.
You know, Casio keyboard is the one that I recognize as well for the exact same reason. Growing up with a Casio keyboard in my room and being able to play with it, and just seeing that, and like there's something about the alliteration, the puns, the naming puns, like it's on point, and it's a giggle every time I see. I'm like, all right, open the pack. Who do I get? And it's Because I'm not just looking at the stars, I'm looking at the names too. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
I'm not sure if I'm correct or not, and maybe David can inform me, but I believe like literally that was the first one we saw. And I just thought, oh, how clever is this, right? It was just so wonderful. It really, really stood apart. I'm like, this is so good. If if every card after that is half as good, then we have a really compelling set of content on our hands. And it turns out everything is on par with that. So I feel like we're really, really winning.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of kind of interesting names that you've already seen, and there's more coming. I mean, it's really kind of clever, a lot of these artists that they've created.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what's to come. We've only had the one genre pack so far, so I'm excited to crack some open coming up this week. All right, we had a couple folks come on up. Let's throw the mic over to Doge fellas.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey Doge.
Great.
Hey, good.
Go ahead.
Good. I'm really sorry I missed the first half, so I'm gonna have to go back and listen to it afterwards. I just wanted to come up and say I love the two genres that you guys are getting into. I mean, music is my life, and I love tycoon games. So I'm really excited for the reveals of the gameplay mechanics and that. And I just wanted to. I've got an Aaron, which is funny because that's my name. I got a 4-star Aaron, so I'm excited to see the rest of them and get building. And I've heard Jazzy say some cool things about it, so I just wanted to get up and say hi, and I'm excited and keep on going. And I love that. I love hearing when people have the same thoughts about developing games and that I do, and the economics last, is because that's kind of what I'm finding to be the experience as well. Like, we built our tokenomics and our economics and laid it out, but as things progress, I'm finding that you have to adjust that all the way and adjust and adjust and adjust and adjust. So thanks for the insight. I can't wait to see what's coming.
Yep. Thank you for your words.
Yeah,
I think you're gonna, when the full mechanics are revealed, as somebody who's involved in really designing mechanics, you're gonna really appreciate, I think, some of the cleverness we've kind of built into this.
That's awesome. And what you guys were saying as well, with kind of reaching into the Web2 gaming industry, those mechanics, especially if your game has some more unique mechanics, hopefully will help us bridge that gap and bring those Web2 players into the Web3 space. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and just so you know, I mean, we are working on other games besides these that have completely different mechanics. Like, each one of them is so radically different.
Right.
And what you're going to see is more and more games from us, I think, that definitely have the look and feel and gameplay of popular genres in the Web 2 space.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a side note, but I think it's worth discussing. Just like in blockchain brawlers, early on we were in conversation with the WWE, and they wanted, a non-trivial amount of money just to get the license. And William Quigley and his infinite wisdom said, I don't think we need it. Like, these brawlers are compelling. The game's going to be compelling. We're going to build a community around a series of personalities, and let's go that path. And we were on similar conversations, as David said, with some of the music labels, right? The publishers on master and sync and likeness rights and all that fun stuff. And they very much, the interesting thing is, not only do they kind of not know how the rights were going to land, but they were really in this interesting position where they thought they had a ton of leverage over us, and they were trying to tell us what game to build and what we could do and what we couldn't do and what we could upgrade and what we couldn't upgrade. And we really found it limiting. And when you said, you know what, this is all just way too complicated in terms of ownership and rights and approvals and all that stuff, we just walked away. And they were a little bit gobsmacked that, how dare you, walk away from us? We're a big deal. We're a huge music label, and you're not. And if you're going to build a music game, you need our personalities. And if you need our personalities, you have to be confined by or constricted by our rule set. And we said, we actually want to err on the side of making it really fun to play game. And we don't want to be, constrained by your approval process or people who maybe don't know how to build kind of gaming in the Web3 space. Like, we want to build what we think is really compelling for our consumers. And so we walked away from both of those opportunities. And I think the games, the net on the game entertainment value in and of itself, is certainly improved because of that. And then once we gain what we think will be a modicum of critical and commercial success, we can go back and have a different conversation. Of course, we're negotiating from more of a point of strength opposed to the unknown.
And I'd like to also add that you also have Yoshi Kondo in your back pocket, and I know that he did a lot of the development of the music for Blockchain Brawlers.
Oh, good old Yoshi drops. Yeah, we do have Yoshi in our back pocket. He's I don't know. He's created he literally said, I said I need some music for Brawlers, and we're going to use them on Music Mogul. He said, okay, here's 400 songs. Tell me which ones you like. I'm like, oh my god. I said, can't you just tell me? He said, no, you pick the ones you like. I'm like, great. There goes my weekend, and then my next weekend, and then my next weekend.
Yeah, he's like very good at putting up content. Absolutely.
He's the best. Yeah.
All right. Our next question will come from Zuler. Thanks for coming up.
Hey guys, how are you doing?
We're well. How are you?
Great.
I'm glad. First of all, I want to congratulate you for bringing a refreshing game into the blockchain. I know that Wax needs of these new engaging experiences. And I know you might be tired of this question, but however, I would love to know about your thought process in releasing 20,000 packs before the game is out. I mean, how do you expect the secondary market to behave during these drops and maybe the following months prior to the game release? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think so. The reason we wanted to start, releasing the packs was so that people could start the crafting process. I think we didn't really anticipate that there would be a very active secondary market prior to the game launch. It just really was more about giving people a chance to start, crafting and kind of building their collection of artists. The way the game is designed, what theoretically should happen is that you're going to see a robust secondary market where people are essentially buying and selling artists that they have with other, and trading them with other players to try and get the best lineup possible for each week. So based on what individual players think will be the best lineup for a particular week, you'll probably see people buy and sell artists. They'll see someone, if they think one artist is on the rise, they may start buying it off the marketplaces, and they'll probably start selling other artists that they think are on their way down to fund buying of those artists. So we anticipate that there'll be a robust secondary market once the game launches. We kind of realized that there wasn't going to be one prior to that, which is why we're trying to launch. We started the NFT collection sales. When we originally set them, the first one, our anticipation was that this game was going to be ready for launch potentially sometime in, September. It's going to probably be more likely October, and unfortunately, that's just the reality of game design. Anybody who's actually built a game, or game development, I should say, anybody who's ever developed a game will tell you, nothing is ever done in the timeline you originally think it'll be done.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, I think was that everyone that came up?
I believe so.
I believe so. All righty. Well, we're getting pretty close to time. I want to thank again, David, thank you so much. Mike, thanks again, as always, for coming on up. I appreciate you making the journey without your sidekick, Loose Lips. So I really appreciate that for you today. Please, everyone, don't forget to check out the Music Mogul R&B Hip and Hip Hop pack sale tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I want to give a huge thank you to our community for coming out today to learn and get excited for the games that are being created in our ecosystem and from our studio. I hope everyone has a great Wax Wednesday and has a fantastic evening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great one.
Have a great Wax Wednesday.